The glow of the monitor was a familiar comfort, sometimes a curse, burning late into the night. My world was the internet, a labyrinth of forums, archives, and forgotten corners where the strange and obscure thrive. I wasn't a hacker, just an enthusiast, a digital archaeologist, sifting through the layers of the past, particularly the cinematic past. I loved the film, truly, but not just the polished, studio-approved versions. I craved the raw cuts for the unreleased footage of the director's true version before it was compromised by test screenings and marketed demands. It was this obsession that led me to a real grave, a forum to its ancient design and looked like it had crawled out of the GeoCities page. It was a haven for lost media obsessives, a place where people discuss urban legends of cinema, mythical cult films and cuts that were whispered about but never seen. Most of this speculation, half-remembered anecdotes, or outright fabrication. But sometimes, there was a kernel of the truth. I have been lurking for weeks, mostly in threads about the early horror cuts or sci-fi alternate endings. Then a new post caught my eye. Only a few hours old, the title was blunt, almost aggressive. Shaun of the Dead, the real cut. What they didn't want you to see. My first instinct was skepticism. Shaun of the Dead was a classic, a perfect blend of horror and comedy. What could possibly be a real cut? The director's commentary talked about a few deleted scenes, mostly minor gags, but nothing that suggests fundamentally a different film. I clicked on bracing myself for a grainy bootleg or a fan edit. The post was short, written by a user named The Archivist. No long preamble, no dramatic claims, just a single paragraph. For years, there had been whispers of an early version of Shaun of the Dead, a darker version, not just more horror, but fundamentally different tone and intent. This isn't a fan edit. This isn't a deleted scene compilation. This is a full feature-length cut, predicting the theatrical release by months, possibly even a year. It was never meant to be seen. Consider this a warning or an invitation. The link is below. Download at your own risk. It won't be up for long. And then a direct link. No YouTube, no Vimeo, just a raw, unsecure file host that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. The file was simply named SOTD earlycut.avi. A shiver of not of fear, but of pure unadulterated excitement ran down my spine. And Dave.avi file, potentially from 2003-2004, this felt legitimate, archaic. It wasn't modern hoax. If it was real, it was a piece of cinematic history, a lost artifact. I clicked on the link and the download process bar crept along, teasingly slow, like how the internet itself was hesitant to give up its secret. It took almost an hour for the 1.5 GB file to transfer. As it downloaded, a strange feeling began to settle over me, a subtle unease, unlike the air in my room that had grown heavier, colder, and the kind of prickling sensation you get when you're alone but feel watched. I dismissed it as nerves, pure anticipation. Finally, the download completed, and I moved my file to my desktop, the icon on a generic media player symbol. I opened it. The screen flickered briefly, displaying a corrupted green artifact, then settled into a low resolution, slightly desaturated image. The image ratio was a bit off and a little narrower than I remembered in the film being. The opening titles rolled and starked against the grimly black background. The font similar, but something harsher, less playful. The iconic Shaun of the Dead title card appeared, but the usual upbeat, the most jaunty score was absent, replaced by a low dissonant drone that grated on my ears. Then the film began. It started much like the version I know. Shaun still lost in haze of his aimless life, Liz fed up, Ed a chaotic force of nature, but the immediate differences were jarring. Shaun looked more generally miserable, not just comedically pathetic, but his eyes held a deeper of sadness, a wariness that went on beyond mild fascination. When he stared blankly, it wasn't a gag. It was a face of despondently. Ed, likewise, was a lovable slacker and more unhinged. His movements were jerky and his laughter borderline manic, and his eyes, they even caught the light, seemed to hold a desperate, almost feral edge. His drug use wasn't hinted at. It was apparent in a nervous twitch, a constant fidget. The first hint of the impending apocalypse felt like a less quirky lead-up to a horror comedy and more insidious. Creeping illness, the news reports are muted, the background chatter of the shops more obnoxious, less ignorable. When Shaun walked past the growing horde of zombies without noticing, it wasn't funny, it was just a chilling testament to his profound disconnection, a blindness born of sheer empathy. Then came David, the first zombie Shaun and Ed encounter in the garden. In the theatrical release, it was a moment of confused, awkward comedy, a slow realization punctured by the record throw. There it was different. David just wasn't shamble. He lurched with a horrifying, unnatural speed. His movements spasmodic and violent. The sound design was stripped so bare, no humorous oof was even when the record hit. It was just a sickening thud. The moans of newly undead weren't generic groans. They were guttural, rasping sounds that seemed to convey agony and bottomless hunger. My hands clenched onto my desk, and the initial excitement was replaced by the growing dread. This wasn't Shaun of the Dead. Not really. The episode from the house became frantic. The escape from it was desperate scramble, devoid of any real humor. Shaun's fear was palpable and his competence non-existent. He was a rabbit caught in the deadlights, driven by pure instinct. Ed, in his version, seemed to be almost gleefully fascinated by the carnage, a terrifying smile occasionally flickering across his face as he observed the zombies. It was unsettling. The contrast between the comedic persona I knew and this was disturbing, almost psychopathic character. When they arrived at Liz's flat, the atmosphere was thick in resentment. Liz's anger wasn't played for laughs. It was raw, bitter. She looked at Shaun not with disappointment, but with genuine contempt. The group dynamic was fractured in a collection of individuals barely tolerating each other, bound only by the intimate threat. There was no sense of camaraderie, no underlying affection. The journey to the Winchester was there in the film truly diverged into something else entirely. The streets were not just littered with zombies, but they were also scenes of utter devastation. Corpses lay dismembered, not just bitten. The sounds of distant screams, not just moans, echoed throughout the bleak urban landscape. The few survivors they encountered were either catatonic with fear or violently desperate, fighting each other for scraps of safety. There was no witty banter, no clever pulp culture references to lighten the mood, just a relentless, grinding horror of a world falling apart. Inside the Winchester, the tension was suffocating. The initial relief quickly curdled into paranoia. The theatrical version had the satisfying, if darkly comedic sequence of Shaun and Ed dispatching zombies in time to the Queen. Here, the battle was so brutal, messy, and terrifying. There was no music, just the sickening wet sounds of impacts, the desperate grunts of the living, and the guttural roars of the dead. Limbs were torn, blood was sprayed with the sickening realism, and the desperation in the survivor's eyes was harrowing. Barbara's bite in this scene was a revelation of true horror. The theatrical version played it for tragic pathos, the slow and sad realization of the inevitable transformation. Here it was a sudden violent attack. She didn't just slump and went to rigid. Her eyes went wide with a silent scream before he began to convulse in a grotesque parody of life. Her transformation was agonizing slow, her body twisting and crackling as the infection took hold. But when Shaun finally put her down, it wasn't a reluctant mercy, but with a desperate guttural sob, a primal act of self-preservation that broke him. He didn't emerge hardened. He emerged ravaged, his spirit visibly crushed. David and Diane's depths were even more disturbing. David didn't just get disemboweled by the horde. He was pulled apart, screaming, his entrails spilling out in a horrifying, prolonged sequence. Diane's reaction wasn't just brave or selflessness. It was a scream of pure her animal terror, followed by her own agonizing end, dragging her down into the squirming mass of the undead. There was no quick cut, no relief. The camera lingered, forcing you to watch and truly witness the brutal, senseless nature of their demise. Shaun was no hero. He was a broken man, constantly on the verge of tears. His attempts at his leadership was pathetic and futile. Ed, rather than being a loyal friend, became a liability, his drug-fueled paranoia intensifying, making him unpredictable and openly hostile towards Shaun. Their friendship frayed and snapped, replaced by desperate, resentful codependence. The climax was nothing like the theatrical release. There was no last stand of defiance, just a slow, agonizing siege. The Winchester, once a symbol of comfort, became a tomb, and the remaining survivors, Shaun, Liz, and a barely conscious Ed, huddled in the cellar. The sounds of the zombies above were relentless, a constant gnawing presence. There was no rescue, no military, no helicopter, just the sounds of the door above giving way, and the cellar filling with the groans of the undead. Shaun and Liz exchanged a final broken look, not of love, but of weary resignation, Ed twitching the corner and beginning to laugh in a hollow, broken sound before he too was overcome. The camera focused on Shaun. His face was streaked with dirt and tears, and his eyes hollow. He didn't fight back in a heroic last act. He just simply slumped against the wall, head bowed and grasping his hands, for the dead reached for him. The screen went black. But the film wasn't over. The sound continued. The wet tearing sounds of the flesh, guttural feasting, the sickening slurping. It went on for what felt like an eternity, dragging out the horror and forcing me to internalize the final miserable end of every character I knew, every shred of hope extinguished. Then silence, and the credits just roll, slow and sparse against a black screen. No music at all, just the names, stark and cold. I sat there in the dark, my room now feeling generally cold. The air was thick with something I couldn't name, a lingering scent of decay that wasn't real, but it felt utterly present. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely move the mouse. This wasn't Shaun of the Dead. This was a nightmare, a descent into the bleakless corners of the human condition, stripped off of all horror, all hope. It felt like a violation, like I'd seen something I was never meant to be seen, a truth about the world that had been written hidden for a good reason. I tried to find the forum post again. Gone. Completely. The thread titled Shaun of the Dead, the real cut, had vanished without a trace. I searched the archivist, but found no other posts, profile. It was as if he had never existed. Only the AVI file remained on my desktop in a digital scar. I couldn't shake it. For days the film played in a loop in my mind. The sounds, the images, the terrifying real despair. When I tried to watch the official Shaun of the Dead, it felt hollow, a childish fantasy. The jokes felt forced, a happy ending, a cruel secondary lie. I sat there seeing the world differently. The mundane routines of people on the street seemed meaningless rituals before the inevitable brutal end. The smiles of strangers seemed fragile, easily shattered, and everyday struggles of life, but it felt like the initial, ignored symptoms of a creeping apocalypse. I found myself becoming withdrawn, much like Shaun of the Dead, the early scenes of the lost film. I neglected my work, my apartment. The vibrant colors of the world seemed muted, desaturated, just like the film itself. The cheerful sounds of the city, of once been a comforting hum, now felt like a thin veil over deeper and more sinister silence. I began to hear things too, distant guttural moans that would soon fade as soon as I focused on them, just out of earshot. One evening I caught my reflection looking in the dark screen of my head-turned-off monitor. My eyes were sunken, dark circles beneath them. My face was pale thin. I looked tired, profoundly so, and the weariness that went beyond lack of sleep. And in that brief, unsettling moment, I saw it. A flicker, a subtle shift in my expression. My lips curled, just barely into a distant, almost a manic grin, not my own. It was Ed's grin, the one in the lost film, the one that had the terrifying fascination for the decay of the world. A cold dread seized me. The film hadn't just shown me the alternative reality, it infected me. It showed me the truth, the one that the world works so hard to conceal, the one that the official happy endings lie about, and now I couldn't unsee it. The world wasn't just a place of quirky heroes and hopeful finales. It was a place of slow, agonizing descent, where hope was a delusion, and everyone was just waiting for the going to begin. I saw in the eyes of the people on the street, the tired cashier, the distant stranger. They just hadn't realized it yet, but I had, and I had knew the whole chilling certainty that I would never be able to go back to the comforting lie again. My phone rang, startling me. My boss, he was calling to check in after I missed work for 2 days. I let it ring. The sound seemed trivial, irrelevant. All that mattered was the truth. The dark, beautiful, horrifying truth. I looked at the AVI file on my desktop, and it seemed to pulse. A black mirror reflecting the bleakness of now owned my soul. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I could feel the cold, grasping my hands reaching for me, just like they had reached for Shaun. Unlike him, I wouldn't resist, because resistance was futile. It always was. It always has been.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Ms. Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.